Hi, my name is Praisy Poluan, and today we're going to talk about teaching as a profession, not a fallback. Those who can't do, teach. This doesn't work out for me, I'll just teach. Why does society continue to view teaching as a backup plan for their original endeavors? When did teaching become viewed as a simple, undemanding job? With the rise of investigations into failed systems, it's time to launch our own investigation into the education system and how teaching has been instituted as a fallback job rather than the serious profession it should be. To do this, we need to look back at the core practices of education and why education really exists to begin with. Education began as a religious endeavor for the privileged. It evolved into track systems for the laborers and the learners until it was state-sponsored to educate all students. But what does that really mean, educating all students? To model everyday manners? To teach students to be good citizens in our democracy? To give them skills to succeed in their post-secondary lives? This is inherently problematic as education is unfortunately largely political. When we say educating all students, the term all has varied throughout time based on race, class, immigration status, and other factors that don't really encompass all students. In addition, we're explicitly told to teach content standards, but we're also implicitly expected to teach global citizenship, college and career readiness, empathy, social justice, 21st century skills, common sense, and I use that term loosely since common sense is actually quite subjective. Point being, we have to teach our students all of the knowledge and skills that don't really belong anywhere else, and thus we're thrown into the expectations for primary and secondary schooling, all while teaching our content standards and creating a safe and brave space for them to grow. Are we doing all of that? Can we do all of that? Can anyone that sees teaching as a fallback rather than a complex profession do that? To improve the culture surrounding education, we need to make it clear to the world just how complex our practice is, starting from within our own teacher education system. Take the education of other complex professions, for example. Doctors. After undergraduate schooling, doctors go through 4 years of medical school, consisting of content learning, boards, and rotations. They go through even more education as residents and during specializations, taking ongoing courses as they continue throughout the entire length of their careers. Lawyers. They undergo 3 years of law school after attaining their undergraduate degrees, along with internships and externships and a 2-day bar examination. Teachers? We take a few tests to show basic understanding of our content areas. We earn our credentials during our undergraduate programs or after. We spend a few months, maybe a year in observations and student teaching, and then we're just thrown to the wolves with the expectation of quality instruction beyond what we were even trained for in our pre-service programs. From there, we do have ongoing professional development, but most of the time they just throw regurgitated content and tools at us without the opportunity for growth, reflection, and application of new knowledge. We need to uproot both pre-service and in-service teacher education. In pre-service education, there's a widely problematic theory-practice divide. This is likely due to the failure to explicitly agree on a set of core practices to teach across all disciplines, as well as the lack of opportunity to intertwine those learning theories and core practices with the actual application of said theories and practices. Most credential programs teach learning theories without core practices and before the teachers delve into the field through observations and student teaching. This is comparable to us lecturing on what Newton's laws are and then months later expecting our students to suddenly remember and apply the laws when solving arbitrary problems. In doing so, we also fail to provide students with sufficient core background knowledge as to why Newton's laws are important in society and the real world, and how they apply to situations beyond just physics and the force unit of study. In credential programs, pre-service teachers are front-loaded with information on learning theories without actually seeing and analyzing them in the classroom setting. Without the opportunity to apply theory to practice, especially in the right setting, the theories are often forgotten, and the pre-service teachers fail to bridge the gap between their knowledge and practice. First, we must come together and agree on a set of core practices to be implemented across all disciplines. Why? Defining core practices is essential to building a solid foundation for both pre- and in-service teaching. By explicitly stating the core practices of what we must teach on top of our content areas, we show others how intricate teaching truly is, and we pave the way for our jobs to become what they really are, complex professions. No more of the explicit versus implicit job expectations. Aspiring teachers will know exactly what intricate knowledge and skills they will learn and apply, and others will finally begin to see what it takes to become an educator. So, what are the core practices of education? Well, that's what we need to come to a consensus on as a group of educators. Grossman et al. Described the core practices of education as multidisciplinary, preserves the integrity and complexity of teaching, research-based with the potential to improve student achievement, allows novices to learn more about their students and teaching because they should be practicing these from the start. Novices can begin to master them as they continue to practice them throughout their careers. And they must occur with high frequency in teaching because, again, these are the core practices of education. One example of a core practice might be creating an environment in which students can openly provide, accept, and apply constructive feedback. This one's twofold. Growth from constructive criticism is important for students to learn for both inside the classroom and for their post-secondary lives in society and just outside of the classroom. And the other part of it is that teachers must learn to successfully create an environment in which students can do so. Here, the teacher's core practice is creating the environment, while the students learn their core practice of openly providing, accepting, and applying constructive feedback. These practices can be implemented through any discipline, and they provide opportunities for growth in both the teacher and the student. From here, we must bridge what Luffern and Berry, Grossman et al., Horn and Campbell, and many others refer to as the theory-practice gap. It is not enough for novice teachers to know what they must teach and how to do so. They must also have ongoing opportunities to apply the core practices and reflect on the social, moral, and cognitive implications of their performance in order to improve. This is just as we would provide our students with opportunities for practice so that they can reflect and improve from there. Rather than beginning observations and student teaching after learning the theories and practices of education, we must push for a shift in beginning field work earlier in each credential program. Pre-service teachers can then apply the learning theories to their observations, reflecting on how they did or did not see a theory in practice, and in what ways they can adjust lesson plans in such a way to align with said theory. Teacher educators in the program could even enact theories in their credential courses and have the student teachers reflect on how the theory was applied or could have been applied within their classes. Experiences such as these are crucial in allowing aspiring teachers to draw connections between what they've learned in class and how each piece of knowledge manifests itself in classroom practice. Like our students, we learn through experience, we learn from reflective action, and we learn by context. Andragogy, as Mesereau describes, is in fact not so different from pedagogy. Adults, like pre- and in-service teachers, simply approach learning with different mindsets. This is largely due to context and culture. In most professions, there's a culture of learning as a finite process. Once you've completed schooling on your profession, you're done. There's nothing more to learn. But the complex professions, such as research or the medical field, instill a culture from the start that there is always something more to learn. Growth mindset. In reality, every profession should work this way, teaching included. We encounter new students every year, each with different backgrounds from the previous sets of students, for which we must adapt our instruction. Every industry evolves in some way, and we're expected to grow with each of them while also teaching our students to do so. Because of this, needs to instill a culture of professional growth within teaching, in-service teacher education must also be uprooted and revamped. Currently, in-service teacher education comes in the form of professional development. Webster Wright asserts that the current conceptualization of professional development is problematic. The term development in professional development frames in-service teacher education from a deficit mindset, as if we're now just discovering the missing pieces in our education. Reconceptualizing in-service teacher education as professional learning places emphasis on studying our existing knowledge of our students, of our context, and of learning, all as interrelated. Rather than missing major pieces in our education, we're simply growing in our profession by learning more about how our existing knowledge pieces are connected and how to better apply these connections in practice. Shifting this discourse surrounding professional development or learning allows us and it allows others to approach our profession as an intricate, evolving practice. In conjunction with shifting the discourse and focus of in-service teacher education, growth mindset must be evident in teacher evaluation processes. Currently, teacher evaluations are typically conducted by administrators, but there's an issue in expectations of administrators in that they need to acclimate to their new sites, they need to provide professional development, and they need to evaluate teachers on top of all of their other duties in running their campuses. This creates a vertical power dynamic that's not conducive to positive teacher-administrator relationships and teacher growth, which makes professional learning and evaluations even more challenging. With high administrative turnover, veteran teachers may not take professional learning and evaluations as opportunities for professional growth, and novice teachers run the risk of termination without the opportunity for reflecting and improving on their practice. If we can't take our own profession seriously, how will others? That said, professional development or learning has begun to shift. It's now typically run by teachers with perhaps some administrators or third-party educators. Similarly, then, it makes sense for professional evaluations to also be conducted by the same professional learning leaders. Consider our own students, for example. We are the ones to teach them and evaluate them, rather than just handing them off to other teachers or administrators to be evaluated. So the same should apply for us. Shifting evaluations to peer educator groups or professional learning communities, if you prefer, allows for a positive environment in which evaluations can be productive rather than defensive. If peer educator groups run professional learning in such a way that they provide positive support without exerting those oppressive vertical power dynamics, then that creates a positive enough environment for evaluations to be about improving rather than just about being judged. Although these assertions are heavily supported by research, I do realize that they're considered bold in our current culture surrounding education. They are, after all, meant to uproot our education system, change that current culture, and evolve our jobs into a profession. It's essential, then, to remember the core practices of education and how they serve as a foundation for rebuilding pre- and in-service teacher education in order to advance teaching as a complex practice. The culture of teaching as a backup plan must change, and we must be the ones to change it. Thank you, and I'll take questions now.